The Adventures of Odysseus and the Tale of Troy by Patrick Collum. For Huey and Peter, this telling of the world's greatest story because their imaginations rise to deeds and wonders. Contents, Part 1. How Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, was moved to go on a voyage in search of his father, and how he heard from Menelaus and Helen the tale of Troy. Part 2. How Odysseus left Calypso's island and came to the land of the Phaeacians. How he fared with the Cyclops and went past the terrible Scylla and Charybdis and came to the island of Thrinacia, where his men slaughtered the cattle of the sun. How he was given a ship by the Phaeacians and came to his own land. How he overthrew the wooers who wasted his substance and came to reign again as king of Ithaca. Part 1. 1. This is the story of Odysseus, the most renowned of all the heroes the Greek poets have told us of Odysseus, his wars and his wanderings. And this story of Odysseus begins with his son, the youth who was called Telemachus. It was when Telemachus was a child of a month old that a messenger came from Agamemnon, the great king, bidding Odysseus betake himself to the war against Troy that the kings and princes of Greece were about to wage. The wise Odysseus, foreseeing the disasters that would befall all that entered that war, was loth to go. And so when Agamemnon's messenger came to the island of Ithaca, where he was king, Odysseus pretended to be mad, and that the messenger, Palamedes, might believe he was mad indeed. He did a thing that no man ever saw being done before. He took an ass and an ox and yoked them together to the same plow and began to plow a field. And when he had plowed a furrow, he sowed it, not with seeds that would grow, but with salt. When Palamedes saw him doing this, he was nearly persuaded that Odysseus was mad. But to test him, he took the child Telemachus and laid him down in the field in the way of the plow. Odysseus, when he came near to where the child lay, turned the plow aside and thereby showed that he was not a madman. Then had he to take King Agamemnon's summons. And Agamemnon's word was that Odysseus should go to Aulias, where the ships of the kings and princes of Greece were being gathered. But first he was to go into another country to seek the hero Achilles and persuade him also to enter the war against Troy. And so Odysseus bade goodbye to his infant son, Telemachus, and to his young wife, Penelope, and to his father, old Laertes. And he bade goodbye to this house and his lands and to the island of Ithaca where he was king. He summoned a council of the chief men of Ithaca and commended to their care his wife and his child and all his household. And thereafter he took his sailors and his fighting men with him, and he sailed away. The years went by, and Odysseus did not return. After 10 years, the city was taken by the kings and princes of Greece, and the threat of war was wound up. But still Odysseus did not return, and now minstrels came to Ithaca with word of the deaths or of the homecomings of the heroes who had fought in the war against Troy. But no minstrel brought any word of Odysseus, of his death, or of his appearance in any land known to men. 10 years more went by, and now that infant son, whom he had left behind, Telemachus, had grown up and was a young man of strength and purpose. 2. One day as he sat sad and disconsolate in the house of his father, the youth Telemachus saw a stranger come to the outer gate. There were many in the court outside, but no one went to receive the newcomer. Then, because he would never let a stranger stand at the gate without hurrying out to welcome him, and because, too, he had hopes that some day such a one would bring him tidings of his father, Telemachus rose up from where he was sitting and went down the hall and through the court and to the gate at which the stranger stood. "Welcome to the house of Odysseus," said Telemachus, giving him his hand. The stranger clasped it with a friendly clasp. "I thank you, Telemachus," he said, "for your welcome, and glad I am to enter the house of your father, the renowned Odysseus." The stranger looked like one who would be a captain among soldiers. His eyes were gray and clear and shone wonderfully. In his hand he carried a great bronze spear. He and Telemachus went together through the court and into the hall. And when the stranger left his spear within the spear stand, Telemachus took him to a high chair and put a footstool under his feet. He had brought him to a place in the hall where the crowd would not come. There were many in the court outside, and Telemachus would not have his guests disturbed by questions or clamors. A handmaid brought water for the washing of his hands and poured it over them from a golden ewer into a silver basin. A polished table was left at his side. Then the house-dame brought wheaten bread and many dainties. Other servants set down dishes of meat with golden cups, and afterwards the maids came into the hall and filled up the cups with wine. But the servants who waited on Telemachus and his guests were disturbed by the crowd of men who now came into the hall. They seated themselves at tables and shouted out their orders. Great dishes of meat were brought to them and bowls of wine, and the men ate and drank and talked loudly to each other, and did not refrain even from staring at the stranger who sat with Telemachus. "Is there a wedding feast in the house?" the stranger asked. "Or did the men of your clan meet here to drink with each other?" A flush of shame came to the face of Telemachus. "There is no wedding feast here," he said, "nor did the men of our clan meet here to drink with each other. Listen to me, my guest. Because you look so wise and because you seem so friendly to my father's name, I will tell you who these men are and why they trouble this house." Thereupon Telemachus told the stranger how his father had not returned from the war of Troy, although it was now 10 years since the city was taken by those with whom he went. "Alas," Telemachus said, "he must have died on his way back to us, and I must think that his bones lie under some nameless strait or channel of the ocean. Would he had died in the fight at Troy. Then the kings and princes would have made him a burial mound worthy of his name and his deeds. His memory would have been reverenced amongst men, and I, his son, would have a name, and would not be imposed upon by such men as you see here, men who are feasting and giving orders in my father's house and wasting the substance that he gathered." "How come they to be here?" asked the stranger. Telemachus told him about this also. When 7 years had gone by from the fall of Troy and still Odysseus did not return, there were those who thought he was dead and would never be seen more in the land of Ithaca. Then many of the young lords of the land wanted Penelope, Telemachus' mother, to marry one of them. They came to the house to woo her for marriage, but she, mourning for the absence of Odysseus, and ever hoping that he would return, would give no answer to them. For 3 years now they were coming to the house of Odysseus to woo the wife whom he had left behind. "They want to put my lady mother between two dread difficulties," said Telemachus, "either to promise to wed one of them or to see the substance of her house wasted by them. Here they come and eat the bread of our fields and slay the beasts of our flocks and herds and drink the wine that in the old days my father laid up, and weary our servants with their orders." When he had told him all this, Telemachus raised his head and looked at the stranger. "O my guest," he said, "wisdom and power shine out of your eyes. Speak now to tell me, and tell me what I should do to save the house of Odysseus from ruin. And tell me, too, if you think it possible that my father should still be in life." The stranger looked at him with his gray, clear, wonderfully shining eyes. "Art thou verily the son of Odysseus?" said he. "Verily, I am the son of Odysseus," said Telemachus. "As I look at you," said the stranger, "I mark your head and eyes, and I know there is such a head and such eyes as Odysseus had. Well, being the son of such a man and of such a woman as the lady Penelope, your spirit surely shall find a way of destroying those wooers who would destroy your house. Already, said Telemachus, your gaze and your speech make me feel equal to the task of dealing with them. I think, said the stranger, that Odysseus, your father, has not perished from the earth. He may yet win home through labors and perils, but you should seek for tidings of him. Hearken to me now, and I shall tell you what to do. Tomorrow summon a council of all the chief men of the land of Ithaca, and stand up in that council and declare that the time has come for the wooers who waste your substance to scatter, each man to his own home. And after the council has been held, I would have you voyage to find out tidings of your father, whether he still lives and where he might be. Go to Pylos first, to the home of Nestor, that old king who was with your father in the war of Troy. Beg Nestor to give you whatever tidings he has of Odysseus. And from Pylos go to Sparta, to the home of Menelaus and Helen, and beg tidings of your father from them too. And if you get news of his being alive, return. It will be easy for you then to endure for another year the wasting of your substance by those wooers. But if you learn that your father, the renowned Odysseus, is indeed dead and gone, then come back and in your own country raise a great funeral mound to his memory, and over it pay all funeral rites. Then let your mother choose a good man to be her husband, and let her marry him, knowing for a certainty that Odysseus will never come back to his own house. After that, something will remain for you to do. You will have to punish those wooers who destroy the goods your father gathered and who insult his house by their presence. And when all these things have been done, you, Telemachus, will be free to seek out your own fortune. You will rise to fame, for I mark that you are handsome and strong, and most likely to be a wise and valiant man. But now I must fare on my journey. The stranger rose up from where he sat and went with Telemachus from the hall and through the court and to the outer gate. Telemachus said, what you have told me I shall not forget. I know you have spoken out of a wise and a friendly heart, and as a father to his son. The stranger clasped his hands and went through the gate, and then as he looked after him, Telemachus saw the stranger change in his form. He became first as a woman, tall with fair hair and a spear of bronze in her hand. And then the form of a woman changed too. It changed to a great sea eagle that on wide wings rose up and flew high through the air. Telemachus knew then that his visitor was an immortal, and no other than the goddess Athene, who had been his father's friend. 3. When Telemachus went back to the hall, those who were feasting there had put the wine cups from them and were calling out for Phemius, the minstrel, to come and sing some tale to delight them. And as he went amongst them, one of the wooers said to another, the guest who is with him has told Telemachus something that has changed his bearing. Never before did I see him hold himself so proudly. Mayhap he has spoken to him of the return of his father, the renowned Odysseus. Phemius came, and the wooers called upon him to sing them a tale. And the minstrel in flowing verse began the tale of the return of the kings and princes from Troy, and of how some god or goddess put a trouble upon them as they left the city they had taken. And as the minstrel began the tale, Penelope, Telemachus' lady mother, was coming down the stairs with two handmaids beside her. She heard the words he sang, and she stood still in her grief and drew her veil across her face. O Phemius, she cried, cease from that story that ever wastes my heart, the story that has brought me sorrow and that leaves me comfortless all my days. O Phemius, do you not know other tales of men and gods that you might sing in this hall for the delight of my noble wooers? The minstrel would have ceased when Penelope spoke thus to him, but Telemachus went to the stairway where his lady mother stood and addressed her. My lady mother, said he, why should you not let the minstrel delight the company with such songs as the Spirit moves him to give us? It is no blame to him if he sings of that which is sorrowful to us. As for you, my mother, you must learn to endure that story, for long will it be sung and far and wide. And you are not the only one who is bereaved. Many. Another man besides Odysseus lost the happy day of his homecoming in the war of Troy. Penelope, his lady mother, looked in surprise at the youth who spoke to her so wisely. Was this indeed Telemachus, who before had hardly lifted his head? As she looked at him again, she saw that he carried his head, that head of his that was so like Odysseus's, high and proudly. She saw that her son was now indeed a man. Penelope spoke no word to him, for a new thought had come into her mind. She turned round on the stairs and went back with her handmaids to the chamber where her loom and her distaff were. And as she went up the stairway and away from them, her wooers muttered one to the other that she would soon have to choose one of them for her husband. Telemachus turned to those who were standing at the tables and addressed them. Wooers of my mother, he said, I have a word to say to you. By the gods, youth, said one of the wooers, you must tell us first who he is who has made you so high and proud of speech. Surely, said another, he who has done, that is, the stranger. Who was with him? Who is he? Why did he come here? And of what land has he declared himself to be? Why did he not stay so that we might look at him and speak to him? Said another of the wooers. These are the words I would say to you. Let us feast now in peace, without any brawling amongst us, and listen to the tale that the minstrel sings to us, said Telemachus. But tomorrow let us have a council made up of the chief men of this land of Ithaca. I shall go to the council and speak there. I shall ask that you leave this house of mine and feast on goods that you yourselves have gathered. Let the chief men judge whether I speak in fairness to you or not. If you do not heed what I will say openly at the council before all the chief men of our land, then let it be on your own heads what will befall you. Ah, the wooers marveled that Telemachus spoke so boldly, and one said, because his father, Odysseus, was king, this youth thinks he should be king by inheritance. But may Zeus, the god, never grant that he be king. Then said Telemachus, if the god Zeus should grant that I be king, I am ready to take up the kingship of the land of Ithaca with all its toils and all its dangers. And when Telemachus said that, he looked like a young king indeed. But they sat in peace and listened to what the minstrel sang. And when evening came, the wooers left the hall and went each to his own house. Telemachus rose and went to his chamber. Before him there went an ancient woman who had nursed him as a child. Euryclea was her name. She carried burning torches to light his way. And when they were in his chamber, Telemachus took off his soft doublet and put it in Euryclea's hands, and she smoothed it out and hung it on the pin at his bedside. Then she went out and she closed the door behind with its handle of silver, and she pulled the thong that bolted the door on the other side. And all night long Telemachus lay wrapped in his fleece of wool and thought on what he would say at the council next day, and on the goddess Athene and what she had put into his heart to do, and on the journey that was before him to Nestor and Pylos, and to Menelaus and Helen and Sparta. 4. As soon as it was dawn, Telemachus rose from his bed. He put on his raiment, bound his sandals on his feet, hung his sharp sword across his shoulder, and took in his hand a spear of bronze. Then he went forth to where the council was being held in the open air, and 2 swift hounds went beside him. The chief men of the land of Ithaca had been gathered already for the council. When it was plain that all were there, the man who was oldest among them, the Lord Aegyptus, rose up and spoke. He had sons, and 2 of them were with him yet, tending his fields. But one, Eurynomus, by name, kept company with the wooers of Telemachus' mother. And Aegyptus had another son. He had gone in Odysseus' ship to the war of Troy. Aegyptus knew he had perished on his way back. He constantly mourned for his son, and thinking upon him as he spoke, Egyptus had tears in his eyes. Never since Odysseus summoned us together, before he took ship for the war of Troy, have we met in council, said he. Why have we been brought together now? Has someone heard tidings of the return of Odysseus? If it be so, may the god Zeus give luck to him who tells of us such good fortune. Telemachus was glad because of the kindly speech of the old man. He rose up to speak, and the herald put a staff into his hands as a sign that he was to be listened to with reverence. Telemachus then spoke, addressing the old lord Egyptus. I will tell you who it is, he said, who has called the men of Ithaca together in council, and for what purpose. Revered Lord Egyptus, I have called you together, but not because I have had tidings of the return of my father, the renowned Odysseus, nor because I would speak to you about some affair of our country. No, I would speak to you all because I suffer and because I am at a loss. I, whose father was king over you, praised by you all. Odysseus is long away from Ithaca, and I deem that he will never return. You have lost your king, but you can put another king to rule over you. I have lost my father, and I can have no other father in all my days. And that is not all my loss, as I will show you now, men of Ithaca. For 3 years now my mother has been beset by men who come to woo her to be wife for one of them. Day after day they come to her house and kill and devour our beasts, and waste the wine that was laid up against my father's return. They waste our goods and our wealth. If I were nearer manhood, I would defend my house against them. But as yet I am not able to do it, and so I have to stand by and see our house and substance being destroyed. So Telemachus spoke, and when his speech was ended, Antinous, who was one of the wooers, rose up. Telemachus, said he, why do you try to put us to shame in this way? I tell all here that it is not we, but your mother who is to blame. We, knowing her husband Odysseus is no longer in life, have asked her to become the wife of one of us. She gives us no honest answer. Instead, she has given her mind to a device to keep us still waiting. I will tell you of the counsel that what this device is. The lady Penelope set up a great loom in her house and began to weave a wide web of cloth. To each of us she sent a message saying that when the web she was working at was woven, she would choose a husband from amongst us. Laertes, the father of Odysseus, is alone with none to care for him, living or dead. Said she to us, I must weave a shroud for him against the time which cannot now be far off when old Laertes dies. Trouble me not while I do this, for if he should die and there be no winding sheet to wrap him round, all the women of the land would blame me greatly. We were not oppressive, and we left the lady Penelope to weave the web, and the months have gone by, and still the web is not woven. But even now we have heard from one of her maids how Penelope tries to finish her task. What she weaves in the daytime she unravels at night. Never then can the web be finished, and so does she try to cheat us. She has gained praise from the people for doing this. How wise is Penelope, they say, with her devices. Let her be satisfied with their praise then, and leave us alone. We too have our devices. We will live at her house and eat and drink there and give orders to her servants, and we shall see which will satisfy her best. To give answer or to let the wealth of her house be wasted. As for you, Telemachus, I have these words to say to you. Lead your mother from your father's house and to the house of her father Icarius. Tell Icarius to give her in marriage to the one she chooses from amongst us. Do this, and no more goods will be wasted in the house that will be yours. Then Telemachus rose and said, Never will I lead my mother out of a house that my father brought her into. Quit my father's house, or as I tell you now, the day may come when a doom will fall upon you there for your insolence in it. And even as Telemachus spoke, 2 eagles from a mountain crest flew over the place where the council was being held. They wheeled above and flapped their wings and looked down upon the crowd with destruction in their gaze. They tore each other with their talons and then flew away across the city. An old man who was there, Halitherses by name, a man skilled in the signs made by birds, told those who were around what was foreshown by the combat of the eagles in the air. Odysseus said, is not far from his friends. He will return, and his return will mean affliction for those who insult his house. Now let them make an end of their mischief. But the wooers only laughed at the old man, telling him he should go home and prophesy to his children. Then arose another old man, whose name was Mentor, and he was one who had been a friend and companion of Odysseus. He spoke to the council, saying, never again need a king be gentle in his heart, for kind and gentle to you all was your king Odysseus. And now his son asks you for help, and you do not hurry to give it him. It is not so much an affliction to me that these wooers waste his goods, as that you do not rise up to forbid it, but let them persist in doing it on the hazard of their own heads. For a doom will come on them, I say, and I say again to you of the council, you are many and the wooers are few. Why then do you not put them away from the house of Odysseus? But no one in the council took the side of Telemachus and Halitherses and Mentor. So powerful were the wooers, and so fearful of them were the men of the council. The wooers looked at Telemachus and his friends with mockery. Then for the last time Telemachus rose up and spoke to the council. I have spoken in the council, and the men of Ithaca know, and the gods know the rights and wrongs of my case. All I ask of you now is that you give me a swift ship and 20 youths to be my crew, so that I may go to Pylos and to Sparta to seek tidings of my father. If I find he is alive and that he is returning, then I can endure to wait another year in the house and submit to what you do there. Even at this speech they mocked, said one of them, Leocritus by name, though Odysseus be alive and should one day come into his own hall, that would not affright us. He is one and we are many, and if you should strive with those who outnumber him, why then let his doom be on his own head. And now, men of the council, scatter yourselves and go each to his own home, and let Mentor and Halitherses help Telemachus to get a ship and a crew. Leocritus said that knowing that Mentor and Halitherses were old and had few friends, and that they could do nothing to help Telemachus to get a ship, the council broke up, and those who were in it scattered. But the wooers went together back to the house of Odysseus. 5. Telemachus went apart, and going by himself came to the shore of the sea. He dipped his hands into the sea water and prayed, saying, O goddess Athene, you who did come to my father's hall yesterday, I have tried to do as you bade me, but still the wooers of my mother hinder me from taking ship to seek tidings of my father. He spoke in prayer, and then he saw one who had the likeness of the old man Mentor coming towards him. But by the gray, clear, wonderfully shining eyes, he knew that the figure was none other than the goddess Athene. Telemachus, said she, if you have indeed one drop of your father's blood in you, or one portion of his spirit, if you are, as he was, one ready to fulfill both word and work, your voyage shall not be in vain. If you are different from what he was, I have no hope that you will accomplish your desire. But I have seen in you something of the wisdom and the courage of Odysseus. Hear my counsel then, and do as I direct you. Go back to your father's house and be with the wooers for a time, and get together corn and barley flour and wine in jars. And while you are doing all this, I will gather together a crew for your ship. There are many ships in seagirt Ithaca, and I shall choose the best for you, and we will rig her quickly and launch her on the wide deep. When Telemachus heard her counsel, he tarried no more, but went back to the house and stood amongst the wooers. And when he had spoken with them, he went down into the treasure vault. It was a spacious room filled with gold and bronze and chests of raiment and casks of wine. The doors of that vault were closed night and day, and Euryclea, the dame, who had been the nurse of Telemachus when he was little, guarded the place. She came to him, and he spoke to her. My nurse, said he, none but yourself must know what I would do now, and you must swear not to speak of it to my lady mother until 12 days from this. Fill 12 jars with wine for me now, and pour 12 measures of barley meal into well-sewn skins. Leave them all together for me, and when my mother goes into the upper chamber, I shall have them carried away. Lo, nurse, I go to Pylos and to Sparta to seek tidings from Nestor and Menelaus of Odysseus, my father. When she heard him say this, the nurse Euryclea lamented. Ah, wherefore, dear child, she cried, has such a thought risen in your mind? How could you fare over wide seas and through strange lands, you who were never from your home? Stay here where you are well beloved. As for your father, he has long since perished among strangers. Why should you put yourself in danger to find out that he is no more? Nay, do not go, Telemachus, my fosterling, but stay in your own house and in your own well-beloved country. Telemachus said, Dear nurse, it has been shown to me that I should go by a goddess. Is not that enough for you and for me? Now make all ready for me as I have asked you, and swear to me that you will say nothing of it to my mother until 12 days from this, or until she shall miss me herself. Having sworn as he asked her, the nurse Euryclea drew the wine into jars and put the barley meal into the well-sewn skins. Telemachus left the vault and went back again into the hall. He sat with the wooers and listened to the minstrel Phemius sing about the going forth of Odysseus to the wars of Troy. And while these things were happening, the goddess Athene went through the town in the likeness of Telemachus. She went to this youth and that youth and told them of the voyage, and asked them to make ready and go down to the beach where the boat would be. And then she went to a man called Noemon and begged him for a swift ship, and Noemon gave it her. When the sun sank and when the ways were darkened, Athene dragged the ship to where it should be launched and brought the tackling to it. The youths whom Athene had summoned, they were all of the age of Telemachus, came, and Athene aroused them with talk of the voyage. And when the ship was ready, she went to the house of Odysseus. Upon the wooers who were still in the hall, she caused sleep to fall. They laid their heads upon the tables and slumbered beside the wine cups. But Athene sent a whisper through the hall, and Telemachus heard, and he rose up and came to where she stood. Now she had on the likeness of old Mentor, the friend of his father Odysseus. Come, said she, your friends are already at the oars. We must not delay them. But some of the youths had come with the one whom they thought was old Mentor. They carried with Telemachus the skins of corn and the casks of wine. They came to the ship, and Telemachus with a cheer climbed into it. Then the youths loosed the ropes and sat down at the benches to pull the oars. And Athene, in the likeness of old Mentor, sat at the helm. And now they set up the mast of pine, and they made it fast with forestays, and they hauled up the sails with ropes of twisted oxhide. And a wind came and filled out the sails, and the youths pulled at the oars, and the ship dashed away. All night long, Telemachus and his friends sat at the oars and under the sails, and felt the ship bearing them swiftly onward through the dark water. Phemius the minstrel was with them, and as the night went by, he sang to them of Troy and of the heroes who had waged war against it. 6. Troy, the minstrel sang, was the greatest of the cities of men. It had been built when the demigods walked the earth. Its walls were so strong and so high that enemies could not break nor scale them. Troy had high towers and great gates. In its citadels there were strong men well armed, and in its treasuries there were stores of gold and silver. And the king of Troy was Priam. He was old now, but he had sons that were good captains. The chief of them all was Hector. Hector, the minstrel sang, was a match for any warrior the nations could send against Troy. Because he was noble and generous as well as brave, the people were devoted to him. And Hector, Priam's son, was commander in the city. But Priam had another son who was not counted amongst the captains. Paris was his name. Now when Paris was in his infancy, a soothsayer told King Priam that he would bring trouble upon Troy. Then King Priam had the child sent away from the city. Paris was reared amongst country people, and when he was a youth he herded sheep. Then the minstrel sang of Peleus, the king of Phthia, and of his marriage to the river nymph Thetis. All the gods and goddesses came to their wedding feast. Only one of the immortals was not invited, Eris, who is Discord. She came, however, at the games that followed the wedding feast. She threw a golden apple amongst the guests, and on the apple was written, "For the fairest." Each of the three goddesses who was there wished to be known as the fairest, and each claimed the golden apple. Aphrodite, who inspired love, Athene, who gave wisdom, and Hera, who was the wife of Zeus, the greatest of the gods. But no one at the wedding would judge between the goddesses and say which was the fairest. And then the shepherd Paris came by, and him the guests asked to give judgment. Said Hera to Paris, "Award the apple to me, and I will give you a great kingship." Said Athene, "Award the apple to me, and I will make you the wisest of men." And Aphrodite came to him and whispered, "Paris, dear Paris, let me be called the fairest, and I will make you beautiful, and the fairest woman in the world will be your wife." Paris looked on Aphrodite, and in his eyes she was the fairest. To her he gave the golden apple, and ever afterwards she was his friend. But Hera and Athene departed from the company in wrath. The minstrel sang how Paris went back to his father's city and was made a prince of Troy. Through the favor of Aphrodite, he was the most beautiful of youths. Then Paris went out of the city again. Sent by his father, he went to Tyre, and coming back to Troy from Tyre, he went through Greece. Now the fairest woman in the world was in Greece. She was Helen, and she was married to King Menelaus. Paris saw her and loved her for her beauty, and Aphrodite inspired Helen to fall in love with Paris. He stole her from the house of Menelaus and brought her into Troy. King Menelaus sent to Troy and demanded that his wife be given back to him. But the people of Troy, thinking no king in the world could shake them, and wanting to boast that the fairest woman in the world was in their city, were not willing that Menelaus be given back his wife. Priam and his son Hector knew that a wrong had been done, and knew that Helen and all that she had brought with her should be given back. But in the council there were vain men who went against the word of Priam and Hector, declaring that for no little king of Greece would they give up Helen, the fairest woman in all the world. Then the minstrel sang of Agamemnon. He was king of rich Messene, and his name was so high and his deeds were so renowned that all the kings of Greece looked to him. Now Agamemnon, seeing Menelaus, his brother, flouted by the Trojans, vowed to injure Troy. And he spoke to the kings and princes of Greece, saying that if they all united their strength, they would be able to take the great city of Troy and avenge the slight put upon Menelaus, and win great glory and riches for themselves. And when they had come together and had taken note of their strength, the kings and princes of Greece thought well of the word of Agamemnon and were eager to make war upon Troy. They bound themselves by a vow to take the city. Then Agamemnon sent messages to the heroes whose lands were far away, to Odysseus and to Achilles, who was the son of Peleus, and Thetis, bidding them also enter the war. In 2 years, the ships of all the kings and princes were gathered into Aulis, and the Greeks with their leaders, Agamemnon, Aias, Diomedes, Nestor, Idomeneus, Achilles, and Odysseus sailed for the coast of Troy. One hero after another subdued the cities and nations that were the allies of the Trojans, but Troy they did not take. And the minstrel sang to Telemachus and his fellow voyagers how year after year went by, and how the host of Greeks still remained between their ships and the walls of the city. and how in the 9th year there came a plague that smote with death more men than the Trojans killed. So the ship went on through the dark water very swiftly, with the goddess Athene in the likeness of old Mentor guiding it, and with the youths listening to the song that Phemius the minstrel sang. 7. The sun rose, and Telemachus and his fellow voyagers drew near to the shore of Pylos, and to the steep citadel built by Neleus, the father of Nestor, the famous king. They saw on the shore men in companies making sacrifice to Poseidon, the dark-haired god of the sea. There were 9 companies there, and each company had 9 black oxen for the sacrifice. And the number of men in each company was 500. They slew the oxen, and they laid parts to burn on the altars of the god, and the men sat down to feast. The voyagers brought their ship to the shore, and Telemachus sprang from it. But before him went the goddess gray-eyed Athene in the likeness of the old man Mentor. And the goddess told Telemachus that Nestor, the king, whom he had come to seek, was on the shore. She bade him now go forward with a good heart and ask Nestor for tidings of his father, Odysseus. But Telemachus said to her, Mentor, how can I bring myself to speak to one who is so reverenced? How should I greet him? And how can I, a young man, question such a one as Nestor, the old king? The goddess gray-eyed Athene encouraged him. The right word, she said, would come. So Telemachus went forward with his divine companion. Nestor was seated on the shore with his sons around him. And when they saw the 2 strangers approach, the sons of Nestor rose up to greet them. One, Pisistratus, took the hand of Telemachus and the hand of the goddess and led them both to where Nestor was. A golden cup was put into the hand of each, and wine was poured into the cups. And Nestor's son, Pisistratus, asked Telemachus and the goddess to pray that the sacrifice they were making to Poseidon, the god of the sea, would bring good to them and to their people. Then the goddess Athene, in the likeness of old Mentor, held the cup in her hand and prayed, Hear me, Poseidon, shaker of the earth. First to Nestor and his sons grant renown, then grant to the people of Pylos recompense for the sacrifice of oxen they have made. Grant, too, that Telemachus and I may return safely, when what we have come in our swift ship to seek has been won. Telemachus prayed in the words of the goddess, and then the sons of Nestor made them both sit on the fleeces that were spread on the shore. And dishes of meat were brought to them, and cups of wine, and when they had eaten and drunk, the old king Nestor spoke to them. Until they have partaken of food and drink, it is not courteous, he said, to ask of strangers who they are and whither they go. But now, my guests, I will ask you what your land is, and what your quest and what names you bear. Then Telemachus said, Nestor, renowned king, glory of the Greeks, we have come out of Ithaca, and we seek tidings of my father, of Odysseus, who long ago fought by your side in the war of Troy. With you men say, he sacked the great city of the Trojans, but no further story about him has been told, and I have come to your knees, O king, to beg you to give me tidings of him. Whether he died and you saw his death, or whether you heard of his death from another, and if you should answer me, speak not, I pray you, in pity for me, but tell me all you know or have heard. Ah, if ever my father helped you in the land of the Trojans by the memory of what help he gave, I pray you speak in truth to me, his son. Then said Nestor, the old king, Verily, my son, you bring sorrow to my mind. Ah, where are they who were with me in our war against the mighty city of Troy? Where is Aias, and Achilles, and Patroclus, and my own dear son, Antilochus, who was so noble and so strong? And where is Agamemnon now? He returned to his own land to be killed in his own hall by a most treacherous foeman. And now you ask me of Odysseus, the man who was dearer to me than any of the others, Odysseus, who was always of the one mind with me. Never did we two speak diversely in the assembly nor in the council. You say to me that you are the son of Odysseus. Surely you are. Amazement comes over me as I look on you and listen to you, for you look as he looked, and you speak as he spoke. But I would have you speak further to me and tell me of your homeland and how things fare in Ithaca. Then he told the old king of the evil deeds worked by the wooers of his mother, and when he had told of them, Telemachus cried out, "Oh, that the gods would give me such strength that I might take vengeance on them for their many transgressions." Then said old Nestor, "Who knows but Odysseus will win home and requite the violence of these suitors and the insults they have offered to your house? The goddess Athene might bring this to pass. Well was she inclined to your father, and never did the gods show such favor to a mortal as the gray-eyed goddess showed to Odysseus your father." But Telemachus answered, "In no wise can your word be accomplished, king." Then Athene, in the likeness of old Mentor, spoke to him and said, "What word has crossed your lips, Telemachus? If it should please them, any one of the gods could bring a man home from afar. Only this the gods may not do, avert death from a man who has been doomed to it." Telemachus answered her and said, "Mentor, no longer let us talk of these things. Nestor, the renowned king, has been very gracious to me, but he has nothing to tell me of my father. I deem now that Odysseus will never return." "Go to Menelaus," said Nestor. "Go to Menelaus in Sparta. Lately he has come from afar and a strange country, and it may be that he has heard of Odysseus in his wanderings. You can go to Sparta in your ship, but if you have a mind to fare by land, then will I give you a chariot and horses, and my son will go with you to be a guide for you into Sparta." Then Telemachus with Athene, the gray-eyed goddess in the likeness of old Mentor, would have gone back to their ship, but Nestor the king said, "Zeus forbid that you two should go back to the ship to take your rest while there is guest room in my hall. Come with me to a place where you can lie softly. Never shall it be said that a son of Odysseus, my dear friend, lay on the hard deck of a ship while I am alive and while children of mine are left in my hall. Come with me now." Then the goddess Athene, in the likeness of old Mentor, said, "You have spoken as becomes you, renowned king. Telemachus should hearken to your word and go with you. But it is meet that the young men who came for the love of him should have an elder with them on the ship tonight. I shall abide with them." So speaking, the goddess gray-eyed Athene, in the likeness of old Mentor, went from the shore, and Telemachus went with Nestor and his sons to the high citadel of Neleus. And there he was given a bath, and the maiden Polycas, the youngest daughter of King Nestor, attended him. She gave him new raiment to wear, a goodly mantle and doublet. He slept in a room with Pisistratus, the youngest of Nestor's sons. In the morning they feasted and did sacrifice, and when he had given judgments to the people, the old King Nestor spoke to his sons. "Lo now, my sons, yoke for Telemachus the horses to the chariot, that he may go on his way to Sparta." The sons of Nestor gave heed, and they yoked the swift horses to the chariot, and the housedame came from the hall and placed within the chariot wine and dainties. Telemachus went into the chariot, and Pisistratus sat before him. Then Pisistratus touched the horses with the whip, and they sprang forward, and the chariot went swiftly over the plain. Soon they left behind them the steep citadel of Neleus and the land of Pylos. And when the sun sank and the ways were darkened, they came to Pherae and to the house of Diocles, and there they rested for the night. In the morning, as soon as the sun rose, they yoked the horses, and they mounted the chariot, and for another day they journeyed across the plain. They had gone far, and the ways were again darkened around them. 8. They came to Sparta, to a country lying low amongst the hills, and they stayed the chariot outside the gate of the king's dwelling. Now upon that day Menelaus was sending his daughter into Phthia with horses and chariots as a bride for Achilles' son, and for Megapenthes, his own son, a bride was being brought into the house. Because of these two marriages, there was feasting in the palace, and kinsmen and neighbors were gathered there. A minstrel was singing to the guests, and two tumblers were whirling around the high hall to divert them. To the king in his high hall came Eteonius, the steward. Renowned Menelaus, said Eteonius, there are two strangers outside, men with the looks of heroes. What would you have me do with them? Shall I have their horses unyoked, bidding them enter the palace, or shall I let them fare on to another dwelling? Why do you ask such a question, Eteonius? Said Menelaus in anger. Have we not eaten the bread of other men on our wanderings, and have we not rested ourselves in other men's houses? Knowing this, you have no right to ask whether you should bid strangers enter or let them go past the gate of my dwelling. Go now and bid them enter and feast with us. Then Eteonius went from the hall, and while he had servants unyoke the horses from their chariot, he led Telemachus and Pisistratus into the palace. First they were brought to the bath, and when they had come from the bath refreshed, they were given new cloaks and mantles. When they had dressed themselves, they were led into the king's high hall. They seated themselves there, and a maid brought water in a golden ewer and poured it over their hands into a silver basin. Then a polished table was put beside them, and the housedame placed bread and meat and wine upon it so that they might eat. Menelaus came to where they sat and said to Telemachus and Pisistratus, by your looks I know you to be of the line of kings. Eat now, and when you have refreshed yourselves, I will ask who you are and from what place you come. But before they had finished their meal, and while yet Menelaus the king was showing them the treasures that were near, the lady Helen came into the high hall, Helen for whom the kings and princes of Greece had gone to war. Her maids were with her, and they set a chair for her near where Menelaus was, and they put a rug of soft wool under her feet. Then one brought to her a silver basket filled with colored yarn. And Helen sat in her high chair and took the distaff in her hands and worked the yarn. She questioned Menelaus about the things that had happened during the day, and as she did, she watched Telemachus. Then the lady Helen left the distaff down and said, Menelaus, I am minded to tell you who one of these strangers is. No one was ever more like another than this youth is like great-hearted Odysseus. I know that he is no other than Telemachus, whom Odysseus left as a child when for my sake the Greeks began their war against Troy. Then said Menelaus, I too mark his likeness to Odysseus. The shape of his head, the glance of his eye remind me of Odysseus. But can it indeed be that Telemachus has come into my house? Renowned Menelaus said, Pisistratus, this is indeed the son of Odysseus, and I avow myself to be the son of another comrade of yours, of Nestor, who was with you at the war of Troy. I have been sent with Telemachus to be his guide to your house. Menelaus rose up and clasped the hand of Telemachus. Never did there come to my house, said he, a youth more welcome. For my sake did Odysseus endure much toil and many adventures. Had he come to my country, I would have given him a city to rule over, and I think that nothing would have parted us one from the other. But Odysseus, I know, has not returned to his own land of Ithaca. Then Telemachus, thinking upon his father, dead or wandering through the world, wept. Helen, too, shed tears, remembering things that had happened. And Menelaus, thinking upon Odysseus and on all his toils, was silent and silent, too, was Pisistratus, thinking upon Antilochus, his brother, who had perished in the war of Troy. But Helen wishing to turn their minds to other thoughts, cast into the wine a drug that lulled pain and brought forgetfulness, a drug which had been given to her in Egypt by Polydamna, the wife of King Theon. And when they had drunk the wine, their sorrowful memories went from them, and they spoke to each other without regretfulness. Thereafter King Menelaus told of his adventure with the Ancient One of the Sea, the adventure that had brought him the last tidings of Odysseus. 9. Said Menelaus, over against the river that flows out of Egypt there is an island that men call Pharos. And to that island I came with my ships when we, the heroes who had fought at Troy, were separated one from the other. There I was held day after day by the will of the gods. Our provision of corn was spent, and my men were in danger of perishing of hunger. Then one day, while my companions were striving desperately to get fish out of the sea, I met on the shore one who had pity for our plight. She was an immortal, Idothea, a daughter of the Ancient One of the Sea. I craved of her to tell me how we might get away from that place, and she counseled me to take by an ambush her father, the Ancient One of the Sea, who is also called Proteus. You can make him tell you, said she, for he knows all things, what you must do to get away from this island of Pharos. Moreover, he can declare to you what happened to the heroes you have been separated from, and what has taken place in your own hall. Then said I to the kind nymph Idothea, show me how I may take by an ambush your immortal father, the Ancient One of the Sea. Said Idothea, my father Proteus comes out of the sea when the sun is highest in the heavens. Then would he lie down to sleep in the caves that are along the shore. But before he goes to sleep, he counts as a shepherd counts his flock, the seals that come up out of the ocean and lie round where he lies. If there be one too many or one less than there should be, he will not go to sleep in the cave. But I will show you how you and certain of your companions may be near without the Ancient One of the Sea being aware of your presence. Take 3 of your men, the 3 you trust above all the others, and as soon as it is dawn tomorrow, meet me by the edge of the sea. So saying, the nymph Idothea plunged into the sea, and I went from that place anxious, but with hope in my heart. Now as soon as the dawn had come, I walked by the seashore, and with me came the 3 that I trusted above all my companions. The daughter of the Ancient One of the Sea, Idothea, came to us. In her arms she had the skins of seals newly slain, one for each of us, and at the cave where the seals lay, she scooped holes in the sand and bade us to lie there, covering ourselves with the skins. Then she spoke to me and said, when my father, the Ancient One of the Sea, comes here to sleep, lay hands upon him and hold him with all the strength you have. He will change himself into many shapes, but do not you let go your hold upon him. When he changes back into the shape he had at first, you may let go your holds. Question him then as to how you may leave this place, or question him as to any other matter that may be on your mind, and he will answer you, speaking the truth. We lay in the holes she had scooped in the sand, and she covered each of us with one of the skins she had brought. Then the seals came out of the sea and lay all around us. The smell that came from those beasts of the sea afflicted us, and it was then that our adventure became terrible. We could not have endured it if Idothea had not helped us in this also. She took ambrosia and set it beneath each man's nostril, so that what came to us was not the smell of the sea beast, but a divine savor. Then the nymph went back to the sea. We lay there with steadfast hearts amongst the herd of seals until the sun was at its highest in the heavens. The Ancient One of the Sea came out of the ocean depths. He went amongst the seals and counted them, and us 4 men he reckoned amongst his herd. Then in great contentment he laid himself down to sleep. We rushed upon him with a cry and laid hold on him with all the strength of our hands. But we had no sooner grasped him than his shape changed. He became a lion and faced us, yet we did not let go of our grasp. He became a serpent, yet we still held him. He became a leopard and then a mighty boar. He became a stream of water and then a flowering tree. Yet still we held to him with all our might, and our hearts were not daunted by the shapes he changed to before our eyes. Then, seeing that he could not make us lose our hold, the Ancient One of the Sea, who was called Proteus, ceased in his changes, and became as we had seen him first. Son of Atreus, said he, speaking to me, who was it showed you how to lay this ambush for me? It is for you who know all things, said I, to make answer to us. Tell me now why it is that I am held on this island. Which of the gods holds me here, and for what reason? Then the Ancient One of the Sea answered me, speaking truth. Zeus, the greatest of all the gods, holds you here. You neglected to make sacrifice to the gods, and for that reason you are held on this island." Then said I, "What must I do to win back the favor of the gods?" He told me, speaking the truth, "Before setting sail for your own land," he said, "you must return to the river Aegyptus that flows out of Africa and offer sacrifice there to the gods." Then he said, when he said this, my spirit was broken with grief. A long and a grievous way would I have to sail to make that sacrifice, turning back from my own land. Yet the will of the gods would have to be done. Again, I was moved to question the Ancient One of the Sea and to ask him for tidings of the men who were my companions in the wars of Troy. Ah, son of Odysseus, more broken than ever was my spirit with grief when he told me of their fates. Then I heard how my brother, great Agamemnon, reached his own hand and was glad in his heart. But his wife had hatred for him, and in his own hall she and Aegisthus had him slain. I sat and wept on the sands, but still I questioned the Ancient One of the Sea, and he told me of strong Aias, and how he was killed by the falling rock after he had boasted that Poseidon, the god of the sea, could afflict him no more. And of your father, the renowned Odysseus, the Ancient One had a tale to tell. Then, and even now it may be, Odysseus was on an island away from all mankind. There he abides in the hall of the nymph Calypso. The Ancient One of the Sea told me. I saw him shed great tears because he could not go from that place. But he has no ship and no companions, and the nymph Calypso holds him there. And always he longs to return to his own country, to the land of Ithaca. And after he had spoken to me of Odysseus, he went from us and plunged into the sea. Thereafter I went back to the river Aegyptus and moored my ships and made pious sacrifice to the gods. A fair wind came to us, and we set out for our own country. Swiftly we came to it, and now you see me the happiest of all those who set out to wage war against Troy. And now, dear son of Odysseus, you know what an immortal told of your father, how he is still in life, but how he is held from returning to his own home. Thus, from Menelaus the youth, Telemachus got tidings of his father. When the king ceased to speak, they went from the hall with torches in their hands and came to the vestibule, where Helen's handmaids had prepared beds for Telemachus and Pisistratus. And as he lay there under purple blankets and soft coverlets, the son of Odysseus thought upon his father still in life, but held in that unknown island by the nymph Calypso.